Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham and such. Some technical issues, crooked cameras and whatever. Things are just not, sometimes stuff doesn't work. And life is annoying. Sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll get to that eventually. So I'll play a little bit of this just garden stuff. Maybe I'll just do this in live rooms, photos and crap like that, stuff I see here and there and whatnot. So, yeah, maybe. Camera was a little disappointing. There's a little bit of funkiness in it, and I don't know. So anyway, but free. So anyway. Yeah, and then I'll get to Piero and Antikontavad. Not in specific ways, just as general conversation and just the conversation about what it is to be alive and what the implications of that is and what your responsibilities are and all that kind of crap. Something like that. So I'll hit the play button anyway over here. This should play, hopefully, without too much mess. So these are flowers, and this was like 6 days ago, so everything's much better now. So of course, the garden is even better 6 days later. Yeah, it just gets better as the summer goes on, better and better. So anyway, all right, so Piero made, one of these ironic kind of videos, like, I guess it's sort of a status you acquire in life. You've made it, when people make videos titled, Why I Unsubbed from Inmendham, and I've had a few of those by famous characters, so to speak. It's just kind of funny, that it's sort of a badge of honor, from my perspective. Maybe from others, I don't know. That's how I look at it anyway. And the Piero example is just so funny because I had complained about his uselessness for the last 5 years, that any conversation with Piero was a dead end, because even when you got him to admit something, a week later he pretends like he never even had the conversation, he never made any concessions to anything. It's like you never had the conversation, and it was so deja vu listening to him today in a live room, because it was it was like 1942 internet. These guys were in the room talking like the last 10 years never happened, and it was just kind of funny, and it was all the same stuff that had been gone over and over 400 times about starting a video site and response videos and all this conversation we've already beaten to death in terms of trying to figure out some physical mechanism to make a difference, when really that's not what needs to change. What needs to change is you have to compete with the market, and the market says you have to create an exciting product of some kind, whatever that is. It has to have those higher production values, has to be quick, and stuff has to happen in a candy kind of way to seduce an audience. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But anyway, it's this conversation we've already beaten to death and gotten nowhere, and nothing's ever going to happen. And yeah, and that's just Piero. Piero's lives in a world where getting something done isn't important. Failure doesn't matter. When, from my perspective, you fail enough times, you got to start thinking about doing something different. It's retarded to be in a failure cycle. But anyway, so I was complaining about Piero 5 years ago, and I blocked him, did different things, unsubbed from over those issues, over the fact that there was no point in having a live conversation with him, talking to him anytime, because no matter what you got him to concede, it's like he starts all over again the next week, and he just goes through the same routine, and it's like the conversations never took place. He learns nothing ever. And and he doesn't pay any attention. He doesn't really listen to videos. He just does his multitasking, and you know, there's no, you know, the substance is lost. He just has some bizarre paraphrase, simplification, and you know, the weight is lost. All right. So anyway, so this new thing came up where, you know, he's been ragging on my physics theory, in the typical Pyrrho way, where he doesn't sufficiently listen to enough of the content to understand the theory, and then just insults a fake perception that he has of it, and what all of its flaws are that he doesn't even understand because they're not really flaws, blah blah blah. And just typical Pyrrho. And so I find his contributions obnoxious and time wasting, because he goes over stuff I've been over literally hundreds of times, and more than once. You have to just keep repeating it, and then he makes claims that for which there's no evidence at all, and he's done this before, and then he'll support his false claims with faked evidence. And again, so in the latest room he did this with gravitational lensing, and claimed there's no images of galaxies in the lensing, and there's no, you can't see the individual stars, you can't do this, you can't do, and I can demonstrate that, yeah, you can, it's in the images, and that those images wouldn't be possible with a lens that's exactly the wrong shape, is the argument being made. So so he doesn't really respond to the simple question, how does a lens that's shaped exactly wrong, that is, the most bending happens in the center and the least bending happens on the outside, and a regular magnifying lens does exactly the opposite. It bends a lot on the outside and bends nothing in the middle. A fundamental flaw in the theory of gravitational lensing, and yet it's not dealt with. And then he just dealt with it again in his cliche manner, which is make up crap and make assertions that aren't true. So anyway, so that conversation was going nowhere. But the thing that got to him was one of the little snarkies in the comments section, who I'm always complaining about how they're useless, and then he sort of complains at me about how, well, you shouldn't call your commenters useless or whatever. But anyway, you know, brought up whether Pyrrho was drunk or not, you know, or has been drinking or whatever. And yeah, I made some kind of remark like, yeah, once a drunk, always a drunk, or some sort of, you know, throw out line. And he took huge offense at that. So that's what apparently was the real motivation for this. You know, I have to unsubscribe from inmendham because he insulted my drunk behavior, which he's done overtly in videos. I mean, it's not like it's an attack on something he does personally. It's an attack on something he does professionally. He does it in his videos. And the whole crew that he hangs around with is all a bunch of drunks. Frankly, they all have a problem. And yeah, frankly, I don't have much patience for that shit. So I can have empathy if you're going to admit you have a problem. But these people who say I have it under control, when they really don't. Their control is yeah, they can manage to keep their job and do a few other things, and they can, you know, not be too far out of control, but they're certainly not in control in the sense that they need this stuff, and it's how they get through their crappy lives. And then they talk about how wonderful life is. I mean, that's the irony, right? They need this drug to get through their life, and yet they talk about how great life is. So, you know, and how we have to make more of it, you know, drag more people into the farce of existence. And they can't seem to manage to get through their life without fucking up all over the place and ending up addicted to a stupid frickin' crutch drug. And again, I have empathy for being addicted. I'm a nicotine addict, so I know what that is. But just admit, yeah, it's stupid. I made a dumb mistake, and I'm owned by the bullshit. But don't pretend it's not something worthy of a little bit of scorn, especially drinking, because again, unlike cigarettes don't make people retarded. You know, where drinking has just ruined so many people and so many lives, and it's just nothing to call an entertainment or to be celebrating in any way or joking about, because frankly it's a menace. It's always been a menace to humans. It hasn't done them any good at all. It's all bad, nothing good. And so why celebrate it? So anyway, yeah, so I just don't have a great opinion of... I mean, so like I said, I wouldn't pass laws against it. I just don't think it does people any good, like gambling and other things. I just don't think it's something anybody should defend as a great thing. I don't think it's a great thing. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so this is a part of the garden, the working part. So, alright. Got fences for the deer and all that crap. Now I got chipmunks that are digging holes in everything and digging up everything. It's always something. It's groundhogs, chipmunks, deers. Yeah, it's tough being a farmer. So anyway, so that's seems like that's what really got to him, like a last straw or something for him. And again, it's fine because as I put before, Pierrot's contribution is totally futile and frustrating. It's of no value unless you want to figure out what it's, if a human being was actually a brick wall, what it'd be like to talk to it or interact with it. And so, yeah, as you learn that's what talking to a brick wall is like. It's like talking to a Pierrot. You hear some reflections and echoes, but yes, there's nothing changes, nothing happens. The next day, the bricks are in the same damn place, and it's really frustrating and useless. Is the point. So good riddance to silly shit. So anyway, so Pierrot did say something, and Econovod made a video where he's basically saying something like, I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but he's saying something like, he's sort of indicating again how he's sympathetic for this people who might have some melancholy or be less than enthusiastic in contemplating what it is to be alive and human, and that he had his own depressive spell, and he but he got through it because he figured out he didn't want to die. And clearly all of us could argue that, yeah, I don't want to die. I mean, I would like to, go back in time and prevent my existence, but yes, dying doesn't sound like any fun. So why would I want to do it? I clearly can only want it as a lesser of evils. So again, when somebody says you want to do something when you're choosing the lesser of evils, that's really cheating. That's really being unfair to what the person's really saying, which is, I don't support this, but out of the choices, I'll take this over that. And that's all they're saying. They're not affirming anything. And so he's almost talking like, oh yeah, I'm an anti-natalist, even though he had a kid and everything. What the hell was that? It annihilated me. I didn't give you permission to do that. Well, it's okay. I mean, you can probably live without me. I wonder if I'm still here. This is, it's just a little buggy today. I mean, this is usually pretty good, this whole thing, but I don't know why it's a little shaky today. So who knows? The video will even get saved. But anyway, Linux has been very, very good so far. It's just every now and then it does create a frustration. So anyway, and it kind of is almost implying like he's an anti-natalist even though he had a kid. That he has some concern about the fact that he can't make that he doesn't have some definitive answer to any of these questions, these fundamental questions, and he can't really choose, and so he kind of chooses by default by saying, well, whatever the default is, we'll just let that happen. Or he has this ambiguous statement, which is the idea that somehow on balance he thinks all the suffering and is made up for by there's just a right amount of happy or good, so it balances out. It just happens that it turns out that way, that it just kind of perfectly balances out. So yeah, it's not really a huge positive, but it's not a negative, so somehow it's good enough, and therefore he'll vote for it. It just happens to turn out that way. That there's just the right amount of suffering, not too much, not too little. Just the right amount to be proper compensation for all the little joy, the value of the joy stuff. So if we had one more war, maybe, maybe that's too much pain and suffering, And if it was one less war, then somehow we'd be way ahead, in the plus column. And again, it's not really, he claims he's not even doing any proper math. He's just, he's advocating. He's just walking away from having to do the serious contemplation about actually figuring out whether you can ever compensate for somebody born into a mental illness and spending 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years absolutely tortured, inside their mind. And if any of us could ever do anything to make that okay. So, I mean, we've used analogies. And so anyway, so Pirro brought up this subject. He said, I'd like to talk about anti-natalism. Well, you've had plenty of opportunity for 6 years if you had some argument to make, and there's been plenty of arguments made. And then he just made the generic idiot statement where he says, it's a choice, a matter of choice. Personal choice. It's an imposition. That's like saying rape is a matter of personal choice. No, I can say it's not a matter of your personal choice. You don't get to choose to impose on something else. That's not your choice. That's where your choices are supposed to start ending, is when you start imposing on something else. Then your rights have to get limited when you start trespassing on other people's rights. And there's this idea presented to you that living things have a fundamental right not to be living things, not to be born. And that if you're going to force them to be born, if you're going to take the ones who wouldn't want to be and force them to be born, you have to have a justification. You have to come up with some explanation for why you have the right to do that, why you have a right to wake the dead, so to speak, the Frankenstein, and animate him especially into this world, this particularly crappy world we live in right now. You have to justify that or defend that with, where did you get the authority? Who granted you the right? And he'll just say something, I didn't do it, the sperm did it. He'll evade the question once you force him to deal with it. But just this idea that he just threw this stupid, ignorant simplification on top of a subject that's very complex in the sense that it has lots of different levels of argument. You have the asymmetry argument, and then you have this fundamental imposition argument where you didn't get consent to do your experiment. The thing that will be affected by your choice isn't you primarily. It's the person who's going to exist. They're the thing that's going to live and die, okay, that you've imposed on. And that's the imposition you have to justify. And to call it a matter, like I said, to call it a matter of choice is just to say something like, rape is a matter of choice. I think he thinks eating meat is a matter of choice, that there's no ethical question saying, where did you get the right to torture an animal and capture it and torture it for your convenience? Not for some necessity, but for a convenience. Where's the rational justification besides might makes right? So if might makes right, then how do you make all these other social justice warrior type arguments that he makes for all these people that need social justice when he doesn't give a fuck about this concept of social justice, but he'll throw it in the toilet when it inconveniences him. When it does something to point a finger at maybe his behavior as being crossing the justice line. So it's just gross hypocrisy, and there's no fundamental principle. He's not against rape. He's not against murder. He's not against taking and imposing. He's just against it when somebody else is doing it, and he's for it when he's doing it. He also made some stupid comment about how killing is crazy, in and of itself or something, when fundamentally that's what we're made to do, is to kill things. That's the native design, is every organism to survive has to, beat the shit out of the competition, literally sometimes. And so it's quite that's almost the native state, is the thing that would hurt or harm or degrade something else in a competition. It's the unnative, it's the civilized state where you say that's wrong and you shouldn't do it. So you can't even get that one right. It really is gotten less interesting and, in my opinion, less intelligent with time. And these arguments, again, are just, they're always just like you're starting the conversation today. Like there's no history, that you've never talked about it before. Every conversation just starts over, and we have to do this is the Pyrrho interpretation, and you just rehash the same arguments all over again. It's just useless to do that. So anyway, that's primarily the thing that just stuck out at me, was this fundamental question of how does anybody defend this idea. Again, how is the analogy of playing Dr. Frankenstein inaccurate? It's fundamentally accurate. You're going to do an experiment for your own purposes. You can't make a rational argument that there's any necessity in the universe that the Frankenstein monster be created. It's only to satisfy your curiosity, your ambition, your desire to have something to play with, or have something to unconditionally love you, or whatever the excuse is. You want to do this thing, and the thing you do, undoubtedly, without any question, carries with it this risk. It's gambling. So there's a straws to be drawn, and some of the subjects of the experiment are going to get the little shortest possible straw. You know, leukemia when they're 5 years old, and all kinds of crooked spines and all kinds of diseases and shit, and their life is going to be quite miserable. And the others will get a nice long straw, and they'll be born to wealth, and maybe they'll have a pretty comfortable life where, you know, everything they do wrong will be fixed with daddy's money, and blah 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 blah. And but that's going to be the reality, is that you're not going to be able to guarantee that even if you're rich, that you're not going to get the small straw, that the kid is going to get that stuck in his pocket. And there's a simple question: what gives you the right to sit there and play this game, to play this risk game, to play this Russian roulette game with these children? And that's what they are when they start, and who will eventually have to go through a whole life of maybe drug addiction or some other problems, all kinds of crises and disappointments, and then finally die of some horrible disease. And you've decided for them that it's worth it, even though you know, and Econovod concedes, for some people he wouldn't want to live their life. He's pretty much said it overtly. You know, he wouldn't get out of bed to go do it, to go live their life. He doesn't see it as a satisfactory existence, and yet he doesn't seem to understand that that's what you're risking when you have a kid. That's what you're opening the door for, that disaster to take place, and you don't have any way to fix it once you make the mess. So what's the excuse for taking the chance? Where do you get the authority to do the Dr. Frankenstein thing? Shouldn't you have to get a permit or something? Shouldn't you have to get some sort of environmental impact statement? What's going to happen? Is your kid going to beat his wife? Is your kid going to molest children? Is your kid, what's the environmental impact? What's going to happen on planet Earth? And what's going to happen? Like I said, what's going to be the impact on your prodigy's victims and your prodigy itself as a victim? And how do you justify it? What do you think is going to be accomplished that's so valuable that you will risk the harm? I mean, where's the math? How do you make it reasonable? You know, it's a fair question, and we don't get a fair answer back, except well, nature gave me a penis, and sperm has a mind of its own. It's not my fault. The sperm did it. That's Pierrot's explanation. He doesn't have anything to do with it. What his sperm do is their business. They have a free choice. It's their personal choice whether to fertilize eggs or not. I mean, completely, irrational responses to serious questions, and just rubbish. And again, so an Endocon is sort of Endocon playing a similar cop-out game, where we just play this. Oh, the default is it's all worth it. So it doesn't really, the baby elephants getting eaten alive by the lions, and this happening and that happening and this happening. Yeah, it's all worth it somehow, because somehow on balance there's enough cheese parties, where people are drinking a nice little wine, have some crackers with cheese, and they have this great conversations, and they do some flirting with the chicks, and somehow it's such a special day that somehow it's worth torturing something. So I've used the analogy that, to make it more personal. If I really wanted to go somewhere, like I really wanted to go to Disneyland, I was so excited to go to Disneyland, some sort of exciting place to go, and I was going as a group of, say, 10 people, and I knew that one of the people was going to be horribly sick and have a horrible time, that it's totally repugnant to them, the whole thing was going to really cause them misery, but it's either all of us go or none of us go. I would be voting for the none of us go, and I don't really understand how any of you people vote any other way. How do you look the person you're going to torture in the face and say, yeah, I know it's silly, but we really want to do it, and yeah, your torture doesn't really mean anything to me, I don't care. I just can't. I'm going to go have a good time while I know you're having a lousy time. So I guess some people can do that. I'd almost argue my parents could do that. There was a few times when, they had a mission to go somewhere, and they just didn't care if one of the kids was a little bit having a bad day. They were just going to drag it along, and not let it ruin the fun. And I couldn't do that. I think it's unethical. It's more than rude to discount and not be mindful of the price that's being paid for something you're enjoying. I couldn't enjoy it. I mean, it wouldn't be something I could just forget and say, he's in the trunk puking, who cares, not my problem. I'm just going to go have fun. I couldn't do that. And maybe I couldn't do it because maybe I was a victim of it enough as a kid or something that, I saw it from that other side. I saw it from the person in the trunk puking. I mean, I just don't see how it's worth it. I don't see how you do the calculation and say this makes sense. And I think the circumstance we're in is far worse than that circumstance. I think most of the people on this planet are not living charmed lives at all. They're living pretty marginal and crappy lives. Lives, like I said, I wouldn't want to live it. I feel privileged to have what benefits I have and advantages I have, and to considering life without them is a pretty bleak prospect, and that's how most people live. How can you endorse that? And that's just the human condition again. And when you start thinking about what all the animals are going through and the huge attrition numbers, most of them killed as children, how do you make that make sense? How do you make the two adult lions in the grass, having a pleasant little splendor in the grass, when that's paid for by the 10 little cubs that had to be disposed of in some no doubt hideously horrible, brutal manner, tormented, afraid, starving, all kinds of very negative, unpleasant things. How do you say it's worth it? I mean, I can't even imagine how you say it's worth it. I can't even imagine how you do it. How do you mix those two things and come up with a positive color when the only color I see is, the brown? It's shitty. It's not good enough. This isn't a good enough deal for anybody to be voting for it aggressively, and that's what these people are, quite aggressive. They give lip service. The Anaconda gives lip service to the downside. Even the Jordan Peterson guy gives lip service to it. Oh yeah, I know life is tough and it's bad, it's rough and blah blah blah, but too bad. It's still lip. At least he's acknowledging it exists. He's just saying tough. Grow a Nietzsche mustache. Syphilis can be fun. Some kind of bullshit like that. It's all worth it in the end somehow. The 50 million people destroyed in a world war. Yeah, it's whatever. All the rape and pillage and death and horror and burned to death and this and that. Oh, yeah, it's all worth it somehow. We're all doing something so spectacular that there's just no doubt about it that all of that grief and pain and suffering has to be worth it. I mean, who could not think so? I could not think so. But how other people think and how I think are obviously not very often similar things. So that is sort of the nature of this problem with communicating with people. And it's, it goes to a very fundamental level of function where I don't really want to bring up the physics thing, but I did the physics room again this morning, and it was really interesting. I mean, I was getting asked questions and I'm answering the questions, but I mean, the fundamental issue is just this fundamental one. These people believe in an ether, and they think ether makes sense. Like, it just makes sense that the universe would be all something, and there wouldn't be any nothing bits. Just be all something. Ether, vibrating or something, and somehow they see it as almost silly that me arguing that no, it makes a lot more sense to have stuff and non-stuff. Stuff, matter, and nothing, something and nothing. That makes sense to me, and it's it's just amazing just to see how, from their perspective, they don't have to defend anything. They can just say, oh yeah, this makes so much sense, this has to be true, where somehow your thing, well, where did the something come from and where did the nothing come from? Because they call everything an ether, they don't have to explain it somehow. They don't have to, where did it come from? What's it made out of? They don't have to answer any of those questions. Well, anyway, it's strange. It's revealing, though, that the fundamental disagreements are the real disagreements. People can argue about all these little issues, even Republican versus Democrat, or all these little political subjects, all this little, but it really goes down all the way to something really basic in terms of how people think. I think that's why they don't get the inheritance argument. You can just make the argument that it's clearly a cheat. We don't allow cheating in any sports. We don't allow cheating in business even. We don't allow cheating anywhere where you just, we give it away because you inherited it. I mean, we think of that as preposterous, that you'd have a competition and you'd say that people earned it by inheriting it. That's crazy. That's silly. That's not a merit system. That's an unmerit system. And here's the most important game in the world, really survival for many people, certainly going to dictate the quality of your life, how long you'll live. Lots of things will be decided by how you fit in this economic competition, and yet they're giving away slots. It's by inheritance. No no earning required, no merit, no anything. Because of some kind of genetic thing? Is that what it's really about? They really do think, the blue bloods, that the king really did have better blood than the regular people or something, and that's why they should be kings, and the lords had better blood, and that's why they should be lords? Is that what they're thinking? I don't know. I mean, but it's obviously something fundamental. It's just visceral for them. They can't understand how you could compare, you know, why they can't even see the illogic of the idea of connecting the word merit to this reward of control of our economic system. They just can't even see it, how this is should even be judged. And here it is, the most important thing in the world. I mean, so much more important than gold medals and Olympics and you know, World Series rings and all this other stuff. This is the real game of life, and that's where they want all the cheats. All the little fake games we play, they don't want cheaters. But the real game, yeah, cheat all you want. Amazing to me. So anyway, so there's something more fundamental in how they're thinking. It's not about the subject. It's about something underlying the subject, and whether that's a God theory or some racial thing, or I don't know what it is, but it's really fucking stupid. And it's everywhere, on every, you know, I'm seeing it in the physics conversations just lately. Like I said, I didn't really realize this was a real thing. The idea that people had these affections for some fundamental thing. Like I said, I just didn't. Apparently, all of these electric universe people are all etherists, and there's just, you know, there's this huge ether movement that exists. It never even occurred to me to even consider ether. You know, this idea that the universe is made out of some kind of goo, and that stuff travels in straight lines through it, in straight line waves that don't spread but move just like a particle or a torpedo or a bullet. What do I need the medium for if they're just like a bullet? Why don't I just make them into bullets? Torpedoes don't need the medium, so to speak. You know, let's just do without the medium. But anyway, that's a different subject. So anyway, like I said, maybe I'll keep this short. Because, you know, I'm irritable. I'm frustrated, and I'm tired of attempting communication. But yes, how to make these arguments when, again, so many of these arguments have already been made. I mean, the argument of imposition, the argument about the asymmetry, the fact that you know, most all the goods that we can point to in the world are really removals of bad. You know, and that's the good. The good is stopping the whip, stopping the negative, preventing somebody from falling in the trap, so to speak. Those are what all the goods basically are. And so those are fundamental arguments about why people should be anti-natalist, in the sense that why would you put somebody in a game where the game is avoid disaster? You're not really going to win anything. You're just going to be happy when you don't lose. Okay, you're not going to win. You're just going to not lose as much. And you're just going to make relative comparisons. Oh, my life could have been so much worse. I could have been divorced 17 times instead of only, you know, 14. You know, I could, you know, I could have killed 10 people as a drunk instead of only 4. You know, so many silly things. But yeah, when I was just thinking silly things, and popped into my head again, is pee-wee football. We actually paralyze children for the sport of football. We do it. We just say it's okay. Go ahead and paralyze a certain number of kids every year. Will be in a wheelchair for the rest of their lives for football. Somehow, people think football is worth paralyzing kids. They think that. One kid. That they think if you just paralyzed one kid a year for the sport of football, it would already be one too many for me. I'd say, no, you don't paralyze children for fucking football. That's silly. That's really silly. It's insanely silly. And yet it's hundreds, thousands even, for football. So yeah, you know, the depth of the you know, irrationality of the people you're attempting to do this communicating with, it goes deep, because they can't even admit that. They can't admit drugs be bad, alcohol be one of the worst of all the drugs. You know, just basic things. You know, they can't admit that lying is bad, that you know, deceiving people is bad, and all that. You know, no, they can't just say it. Be done with this farce of pretending that there's some kind of good game to play in a world where we've made all those things okay. And they're not okay, and they're not healthy, and they're not practical, and it's certainly nothing to be enthusiastically imposing on another generation. You know, another generation of people who won't create a world good enough to live in, like the Piros. Well, eventually somebody's going to build a nest, right? So it's this egg-laying argument. They just keep laying eggs in mediocrity, and they keep promising that eventually somebody's going to make a world suitable for eggs to hatch in. But nobody's ever going to do that. They're all going to do what the Piros do, which is they're going to be self-indulgent, and they're going to fall short of their responsibility. So anyway, that's enough said, I think. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Yeah, so like I said, it's hard to imagine missing, you know, Piro, Barklord, and Skyzer, you know, conversations. But yeah, again, I still do watch, but you know, mostly just for the opportunity to rag on it as the rubbish that it is, because there is nothing valuable in it. The only insights are insights into stupidity. Oh yeah, so okay, that's what stupid says. That's what stupid does. Oh, okay. But that's all you're going to learn from Piro is what does stupid sound like. You know, unthoughtful, short-sighted, you know, superficial examinations. Never really looks at the evidence. So anyway, yeah. Bad scientist. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, the video's a little bit not perfect, and I'm supposed to be moving right towards perfect, right? And I just don't seem to do that. So yeah, that's one of my vices. Just a lot of things. Just working on a lot of things. So I still do hope to do better soon. We'll see how that works out. So sorry about any audio, whatever, any problems, because I just can't, you know, I just can't. Technology's just a little, yeah. Anyway, till next time and such. And thank you for your attention. Such.